क्या हो रहा है इजराइल सीरिया के बीच में?
Clashes between Syrian government forces and rival.
A massive Israeli strike has targeted the Syrian.
So if you look at Jolani is basically, he's somebody who has served as a commander of Al-Qaeda.
How do these minorities in these countries, say the Ahmadiyas in Pakistan or Druze Community in Syria, how do they navigate their relationship with the...
So in Pakistan, you see them getting lynched, getting burnt. Here they shoot them. And they shoot them en masse. So in Pakistan, they might do in a ratio of 1 or 2 every day. Here they will kill 200 people in one day. Right? So the Israel is caught between the Shia extremism and the Sunni extremism in the Middle East. Israel protects Jews no matter where they are in the world. Right? India is a land of Hindus no matter where they are. So there is a similarity in that thing there. That's when Israelis had to step in and say enough is enough. Have you really seen Americans putting sanctions on Pakistan because they have been persecuting minorities? No, of course they have not. The only time they would do it is when they want something to be served by the Pakistanis, and the moment Pakistanis offer themselves on the plate, the Americans are happy about it, right? So it's a game of chess. I think going to war with everybody on everything is not going to solve the issue. Similarly, the Americans really need to take a lesson. They cannot have a policy of good terrorists and bad terrorists. They will have to demolish terrorism. Unless and until you don't demolish terrorism.
हेलो एंड वेलकम टू द पैम्फलेट वॉर रूम। मैं हूं निर्वा मेहता और आज हम बात करेंगे सीरिया और इजराइल के बीच के लेटेस्ट फ्लेयर अप की। और इस पर बात करने के लिए हमारे साथ है राजा मुनीब। हेलो मुनीब, वेलकम बैक टू द पैम्फलेट वॉर रूम।
Thank you, Nirwa. It's always a pleasure to be back in the war room.
राइट, क्या हो रहा है इजराइल सीरिया के बीच में? व्हाई, व्हाट हैपेंड? टेल अस व्हाट जस्ट हैपेंड. 2 days ऑफ bombardment and obviously currently the ceasefire. But what happened? What was the trigger and why did it happen?
See, the trigger was that there's a Druze community which lives in the town of Sueda. So there was an elder Druze who was traveling for business, and somewhere on the way he got kidnapped, harassed, and then killed eventually by the Bedouin tribes, by the Sunni tribes. Druze thought that it has been done deliberately because they are the minorities, and it became a minority-majority issue, and they came out fighting for the guy. Then there was a clash between the two communities, and then the Syrian army got involved into it. And look, as far as the Syrian army is concerned, and so if you look at Jolani is basically, he's somebody who has served as a commander of Al-Qaeda. Now, Jolani was the commander who was sent into Syria when AQI was formed. Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was the commander at that time. He was overlooking the operations of AQI, which is Al-Qaeda in Iraq, which got disbanded in about 2005, 2006, somewhere near that. So, उस समय से अगर आप देखोगे, if you see from that side, Jolani was the right-hand man of Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi till Baghdadi basically broke off from Al-Qaeda and created ISIS, right? So Jolani was heading this front organization called Jabhatul Nusra, which was the front of Al-Qaeda, which was basically fighting Bashir al-Assad, to topple his government in Syria. So that's how back basically Jolani goes into his, you can say, fight against the Alawites or fight against Bashar al-Assad and the fight for Syria, taking over Syria. So, the men in his ranks, the army men in his ranks are essentially people, who have fought against the Syrian army. They are the people who formed the ranks of Al-Qaeda, who formed the ranks of ISIS, right? So that kind of mentality, just because you put them into a disciplined army, is not going to change. So then we saw that Syrian army literally creating, massacre after massacre. We saw what happened in Sueda hospital as well. They get, about 260 people are dead, 300 people are dead till now in this clash. So that's when Israelis had to step in and say enough is enough. Because one, the Jews were running towards the Israeli border. They wanted to get in to save themselves. 2, they are a minority and they're very close to the Jewish population. And Israel sees Jews as a community which actually creates a buffer zone between their borders and on the Syrian borders, because they don't see the threat coming from Jolani or coming from extremism, to right to their borders. So they see these minorities as strategic assets as well, because they're occupying those areas which are on the border of Syria and Israel. So the Syrians, the Israelis stepped in, and then, but it didn't stop them, because if you look at the videos, they're extremely horrendous. The way they have been murdered, I mean, shaving off their mustache, pulling off their mustache, killing them, shooting them, making fun of the
Right.
corpses. So it is very reminiscent of what ISIS did in Aleppo and in Syria when they started getting in with the minorities, right? So that shade is already there to see, for everybody to see that shade. There is no difference when it comes to the brutality against minorities. So I think that is where it triggered the Israelis, because now Israelis think it's going to be a threat. Obviously, it will become a threat for them. They've just dealt with Hezbollah. They're still dealing with Hezbollah. They're dealing with Hamas. You don't want another extremist organization sitting on your borders and then threatening you directly and, taking out your strategic assets as well. So it's a threat to Israel. So the Israelis then send a very strong message. The Americans were not very keen on Israelis bombing. The Turkish have their own game, and I'll explain in a moment what that game is. But despite the Americans saying it's a ceasefire, the Syrian forces didn't stop. They still kept on killing Druze. And the best part is that they were bombing the defense ministry, which is just next to the presidential palace in Damascus. But at the same time, the Turkish had actually told, Ahmed
Right,
al-Shara,
warned. Correct.
also known as al-Jolani, right, the current Syrian president, Ahmed al-Shara, to vacate the palace because there was going to be bombing. So obviously that tells you that Turkey is overtly looking at, protecting al-Shara.
Right.
They see him as their own strategic asset in this region. Now that is a problem. Now why is that a problem? Because till Bashar al-Assad was in power, if you remember, between 2013 and 2016, both the Americans and the Russian forces were in Syria. On one side they were fighting ISIS. The Americans were supporting the ISIS that time, right? Till about 2017 it was happening. At the same time the Russians were pushing back and trying to push these Sunni extremist organizations away from Bashar al-Assad. So after Assad gone, now what has happened is, since they are back in power, now Israel, Turkey sees a chance for its own geopolitical, expansion in the Middle East. They want to hold the area. They want to have their own expansion in the Middle East, because Erdogan has plans to revive his Ottoman Empire, or to build the Turkish influence back to the Ottoman Empire, what it was in in the early 1900s, before the end of World War. So now the Turkish are directly involved into this, and I see this as a pause. This is not something which is going to solve, because the problem is not about only Druze. The problem is also about Kurds, which is about 35% of the population. Turkey sees Kurds as threat. You have the Peshmergas there, right? You have the Yazidis there, what they call the Yazidis, right? So you have all these small ethnic minorities there, which neither the Turkish people like, nor the Syrian majority Sunni population likes. You have Shia population also. So this is just, I would say, a beginning of something which is going to be there in Syria and around Syria for a long time to come. And eventually what will happen is, the more Russians withdraw from Syria, the more Turkish would be looking at increasing their own footprint. So for example, the air bases which have been which are being vacated by the Russians, or the Russians are thinking of vacating those air bases, the Turkish are already looking to fill them up. That is why the Israelis bombed those air bases which were very close to their border, about 100, 120, 200 kilometers, 250 kilometers, because they don't want the Turkish to come and occupy those air bases. Similarly, the Russian Navy is in control of the port there. So the moment Russian Navy goes out, the Turkish Navy is going to come in, right? So it's going to again become a strategic threat to, not from Iran, but from Turkey. Not from Shia extremism, but from Sunni extremism, right? So the Israel is caught between the Shia extremism and the Sunni extremism in the Middle East. So it will have to wait one off another. So this is just a beginning of what is about to come if they don't look for a lasting solution in Syria.
Right. So help me understand this a little, because I know a lot of our audience would also have this question. Druze minority, the community, are they, how are they minority? Do they not follow Islam? Is that why they are minority? What is their...
No, minorities in terms of population, they have very less population. Of course,
But
they don't follow Islam, but then Islam is the dominant population.
Correct.
Yeah, so it's a Muslim-dominated state. So these are the minorities because they are not, they have very small numbers.
So can we say that their, the condition of, say, Druze community in Syria or the other minorities in the Middle Eastern countries could be similar to, say, the Ahmadiyya population in, say, Pakistan?
Yes, I think that's a very fair comparison to make. That's a very fair judgment to make, yes. Because if you look at, Pakistan, if you look at Ahmadis, they are also considered as minorities there. Their religious rights are always trampled and scuttled. They are not allowed to go to mosques. They are not allowed to practice. They are lynched. There is a lot of discrimination which happens with the Ahmadiyas in Pakistan. So you can actually compare the two by saying, yes, the Druze, because, if the Druze start coming or, start expanding a bit, they will also be meted with the same treatment. The only thing is that for now, we have not seen Syria or, Ahmad al-Shara basically going ahead and declaring the Sharia law applicable in Syria, which he is under pressure from a lot of his, companions too. But we have not seen that kind of treatment yet. We have not seen him declaring openly that it's a Sharia-compliant state, unlike Afghanistan, right? Afghanistan is. Syria is not at the moment. But yes, you can compare the... Look, anywhere where there is extremism, majority extremism in religious extremism, the minorities will always be a victim. So whether it is Ahmadiyas in Pakistan or it is, Druze in Syria, they will always suffer the extremism, yes.
See, before I move on to the next question, I want to know how do these minorities in these countries, say the Ahmadiyas in Pakistan or Druze community in Syria, how do they navigate the relationship with the government in power, the people in authority, considering the religious minority status and the persecution they face? How are they generally, navigating themselves that...
So that happens through local leaders, basically. So you have one powerful local leader who would be, having a negotiation or who would be loosely a part of the government because the government has to show them that they are inclusive people. So that's how it usually happens. But then, there's no guarantee of them being a part of the political system which is sitting in the center of the power. Just because they have one or two leaders, community leaders, or tribal leaders, or whatever you want to call them, depending upon where they are and how they are based, in which place they are based. It doesn't guarantee them equal rights. It doesn't guarantee them an equal stake in the say of the state, right? But it does guarantee them somewhat kind of, you can say, I would not call immunity, but some security. That on a daily level they will not be harassed. The problem with Pakistan and Syria are entirely different. Though Pakistanis are radicalized, the mentality is highly radicalized and highly violent in Syria. Most of these people are active fighters. And most of these people have been justifyingly saying that minorities cannot exist. So either they will go for forced convergence, like we see in Pakistan, what they do with minorities, but the mullahs are more, having the street power. Here they have the gun power. So what the Pakistanis do at the behest of street power, these people do at the power of the gun. Right? So they are going to eliminate them. So in Pakistan, you see them getting lynched, getting burnt. Here they shoot them. And they shoot them en masse. So in Pakistan, they might do in a ratio of 1 or 2 every day. Here they will kill 200 people in one day. So that's the difference here. That is exactly how it works.
Right. India continues to have a very good relationship with Israel, right? So in this particular conflict, how do you see New Delhi dealing with what's the latest updates when it comes to Syria?
Look, I don't think New Delhi has an active role to play in Syria at the moment, to be very honest, right? But we have a strategic interest with Israel and we'll back Israel where it is needed, where, strategically it makes sense. Wherever there is persecution of minorities, India is always going to be vocal. India is always going to condemn it. But that is where I see India playing the largest role, condemning it, making noise about it, and making sure that, minorities are not persecuted, whether it is Syria, whether it is Pakistan or any other part of the world. But apart from that, I don't see why, I don't see a very active role of India playing into Syria between the Druze community or the, the Jilani or somebody. I don't see that.
So just few weeks back, Israel was having a conflict with Iran as well, right? And
It's still ongoing, yeah.
It's still going on. But considering, so India has obviously good relationship with Iran. India has good relationship with Israel. There is also interest in Chabahar port. In the coming few months, how do you see? Because obviously all these are important trade routes. India trades with these countries. They have good bilateral relationships. How do you see the next few months panning out in terms of Central Asia with respect to India?
See, I think there are a lot of challenges. First, we have to understand that in international relations, there is nothing called either or. Right? You have to work with every country based on the merit of their treatment with you. Now, we do say that we have good relations with Iran, but I would say we have good working relations with Iran. And then we have equally very good working relations with Israel. With Israel, we have a bit better because of technology and all that. We're more involved with Israel. But at the same time, I think it's where Indian interest lies first is where India is going to hedge its bets from. So if you look at the UN resolutions, which either we have abstained, but we have always talked about the two-state solution of Palestine. India still sticks to its ground, right? We haven't changed our stance on that, and rightly so. So I think that Central Asia is going to be this whole West Asia, South Asia, West Asia, whole this belt is going to be tumultuous. The Iran conflict is not going to stop. The Iranians are not going to stop. It's just a pause. It's just they've taken back. It's a breather for them. Similarly, Israel is continuing taking losses in Gaza. They still are losing soldiers in Gaza. So the war in Gaza hasn't ended. Right? Now the front is opening on Syria. So it's going to be disturbed. I'm not going to say that it's going to be a huge escalation into somewhere where it's going to be war. But today Turkey has made it very clear that, told Israelis to step back or they step in. So that, the diplomatic war has already started. War of words have already started. So it will escalate. If you look at Houthis, the Houthis have again jumped back into the fray. They had declared a ceasefire, now they're back into the game, right? So expect them to create some trouble in the Red Sea again. So whole this region is something which is not, it's like a forest fire which is refusing to die down. And I do see more trouble coming into it. I do see this region not settling in near future. I do see conflicts erupting between Iran and Israel, between Syria and Israel, between Turkey, Israel, Houthi, America. So the Americans are going to be, America, Israel on one side, and you're going to see this Middle Eastern play happening in the Middle East. So I think this West Asia thing is still going to continue this year. And depending upon how it turns around by the end of this year, it will decide where next year it is going to go. But unless and until, look, Nirwa, you cannot bulldoze people out of land. You cannot, just flatten areas and you think that the war has been won. You might have achieved your military, strategy, but you will have to look at lasting solutions. So it's a very, very difficult task to get everybody on the same page when it comes to Middle East. Because there are very different powers who have very different interests. The Turkish have entirely a different interest which is not aligned to what the Saudis have, or what the UAE has, or what Qatar has. Iran has an entirely different set of interests which doesn't align neither with the Saudis nor with the Turkish. Somewhere they align with the Turkish. Somewhere they have an alignment with the Turkish. So it's a power of pull and push happening in all directions. So it's going to be very, very difficult to bring all the stakeholders on one table. Then you have Jordan, you have Egypt, you have Libya, you have Tunisia, you have all these countries around it. So there were 12 countries around it. So it is not going to be easy. It is not something which is settling in by, as Donald Trump says, I'll make a Las Vegas in Gaza. Making a Las Vegas in Gaza is not going to stop any war. This war will continue.
Right. You think India, which has always maintained that, war is not a solution, it has always called for peace, can this this development, obviously, with when it comes to Syria and the minorities, can India use this as a platform to maybe call for attention towards the persecution of minorities, especially when it comes to Hindu minorities in its neighboring countries? That has always been happening, which is also why we have the CAA law that, India would be the national home for Hindus. But what about, can India use this as a platform to say, talk about the persecution of minorities and bring the world attention to it?
Which world?
Yeah, well,
Yeah, my question is which world? If we're talking about the Western world, then you need to look at minorities when Kurds were fighting. The moment ISIS got over, they were handed over, and the Americans withdrew their support. The Turkish made a mess out of them, right? You talk about Yazid, same thing happened with them, right? So it's all about what suits, when it suits for the minorities. But look, there are two countries, I believe, who have always stood up for the righteousness of their people. And those two countries are India and Israel. Israel protects Jews no matter where they are in the world, right? India is a land of Hindus no matter where they are. So there is a similarity in that thing there. But if you look at India, of course, India will be talking about trampling of minority rights. India does talk about minorities. India has been talking about condition of minorities in Pakistan. Have you seen any UN report which has really, really nailed Pakistan on their persecution of Hindus? Have you really seen Americans putting sanctions on Pakistan because they have been persecuting minorities? No, of course they have not. The only time they would do it is when they want something to be served by the Pakistanis, and the moment Pakistanis offer themselves on the plate, the Americans are happy about it, right? So it's a game of chess. There is no right or wrong in these things. It's all about interests. So yes, wherever our interest will suit, we will be talking about minorities. If our interest doesn't align, I don't think we need to talk about those minorities. It depends on how it's going to go. That's my take, honestly.
right. What about the India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor that's been talked about? How do you see because obviously conflict and
the corridor looks fantastic, right? The plan was very good. But if the conflict doesn't end in Middle East, this corridor is not going to deliver what its real potential is. For this corridor to become a success, you need to have peace in the Middle East. Unless and until you don't have peace in Israel, unless and until Middle East is at war, you will always see energy crisis brewing up because of the sea lanes getting closed, sanctions on Iran, oil energy prices going up and down, trade war with China. Everything is going to be disrupted, right? But the key for IMEC to succeed is a very stable and a peaceful Middle East. So unless and until that doesn't happen, IMEC is not going to deliver its full potential.
And how do you think in an utopian world will there be peace in the Middle East? How do you see that?
No, there would be.
Happen?
It will happen. It will happen. But then, it'll take time. It'll happen, but it'll take time. Because at the moment, what is happening is everybody serving their interest, right? But there will be a time in near future where war is not going to serve any more purpose. See, for a war, it has to serve a particular purpose. Sometimes what happens is that war outlives its purpose. What is happening in Middle East is that the war is outliving its purpose. So there is a time which is coming where war is not going to serve the purpose. And when that time comes, and which is very near, which is not very far, we're talking half a decade from now, probably, rough timeline I'm giving you, then it will happen.
Okay, closing remarks on this particular, conflict in the Middle East, amongst many.
Well, my only closing remark is going to be that, the coming times are going to be tough. The Israelis need to go back on the drawing board, and they really need to think how they want, Middle East and how they want peace around their neighbors. I think going to war with everybody on everything is not going to solve the issue. Similarly, the Americans really need to take a lesson. They cannot have a policy of good terrorist and bad terrorist. They will have to demolish terrorism. Unless and until you don't demolish terrorism in any form from the world, you are not going to get peace. So getting these Jolanis into power and thinking they're going to serve their strategic interest is not going to bring in peace. So the Americans, I think, the Israelis also need to push the Americans for that. The Americans will have to come clean because it's become too much now. I mean, I don't see a difference. And this is what happens. People say that America is doing everything about it, but then it is true because they need to stop. So unless and until the Americans and the Israelis don't go back on the drawing board and they don't bring in stakeholders which are equally important. So you need to bring the Arab world, you need to bring the Saudis in, you need to bring the Qataris in, you need to bring the Jordanians in, you need to bring Sisi from Egypt in. They all need to sit together and they all need to chalk out a plan. If they're able to chalk out a good plan, they need to bring the Turkish also on the board. If you're able to do that, I think then it is the thing. Unless and until they don't go back to the drawing board and they continue with the game they are continuing, it's not going to end.
Right. And on that note, I hope all the minorities across the Asian subcontinent are also, not persecuted. And on that, thank you so much for joining us today. And we'll see you next Saturday at 8
Thank you,
p.m.
Nirwa. It's always a pleasure. Thank you so much.